We're going to move on to the next speaker. I've been waiting to hear Dr. Prieto's talk for a while now. So, and we are so happy that he was able to make time to come to the Wellness Trails. Dr. Prieto is a primary care physician for Cape Cod Healthcare at Bone Primary Care, and he is one of the best. He is my doctor. I choose the best. Um, he attended a medical school at the Universidad Central de Venezuela and completed his residency in internal medicine at the University of Connecticut Health Center. He is certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine and has several clinical interests, including geriatrics, diabetes, and hypertension. Dr. Prieto is an advocate of lifestyle medicine and helps guide patients managing chronic disease in a group setting called a shared medical appointments that he conducts in his office. Additionally, he shares his knowledge and passion for lifestyle medicine at community talks, including wellness trails, and had partnered with the Upper Cape Tech High School last year to host the first ever plant-based cooking demonstration, along with the students in the Upper Cape Tech Culinary School, um, led by a physician at Cape Cod Healthcare. That's the first ever thing. And I think today we are very proud and happy to have Dr. Prieto speak about slowing down the aging process, including plant-based nutrition and other strategies that impact the aging at the DNA at a cellular level. So we're going to do like a deep dive into the cell. Come along for the ride with Dr. Prieto. Thank you. This one is yes.
Am I on? Yes? Everybody can hear me? Well, thank you for coming on a Sunday afternoon. It's such a beautiful day, so I really appreciate you coming out. So one of the things that I want to tell you about, I was just giving a talk on slowing down the aging process in general last Friday. So if you were on the talk, you may see a little bit of an overlap. But this time I'm going to concentrate on the DNA level and what happens on the molecular level. Why is that important? Well, why do we age? Why do people age? Now look at this fellas. That's my father and mother-in-law. And first they're 31 and 22. They're very handsome. Then they're holding my twin sons when they were 61 and 52. Now we see them 86 and 77. Now my father-in-law is going to be 91. My mother-in-law died. So why do we see an aging process? Why do we age? When it comes to the molecular level about the DNA, you have to remember that your cells are amazing. They're these structures, living units, and they have the DNA, and the DNA gets replaced whenever a cell gets damaged. So how many cells do we replace? Well, replace quite a bit. Do you know how many you replace each minute? 300 million cells. No wonder why you're tired at the end of the day. But what happens is that if you're making a copy, and the DNA, if you make it tall like that in one strand, it's about 6 feet tall. So you're making 300 million copies of that a minute, and you're bound to make a mistake. As you make copies of the copies of the copies of the copies, those little mistakes begin to accumulate in the cells. Now, when that happens, that's why you don't see a difference between yourself in the mirror now and yesterday, but maybe a picture 20 years ago, you see the difference. So what happens here is that the DNA is coiled into chromosomes. And the chromosomes, the end caps, they have these little repeated sequences that we call telomeres. And I apologize for all the doctorish words, but those telomeres is actually a fail-safe mechanism because each time a cell divides, they get nipped and they get a little shorter and shorter and shorter. And you're born with a very long telomeres, and as we get older, they get shorter, shorter, and shorter. And when they get too short, the DNA becomes unstable, unravels, and the cell sends a signal to the surface, it's time to take me out. So that's how, in theory, we prevent cancer. So then you have the chromosomes, and then you have the DNA. Those are my laces from my hiking boots, and you can see one is perfectly healthy and the other one is gone. So that one has no telomere. So we postulated, talking about the scientific community, well, if we keep the telomeres from getting shorter, we get to live longer. But it was a wrong approach because it's not making the telomeres longer. The telomeres are a marker of what's going on in your body. And then we look for ways to change that. Initially, we see that the telomeres, you have basically two kind of cells. You have the germ lines. They get replaced very fast. For example, the lining of your stomach gets replaced every 3 days. How often do you change the cells in your bones? They're not sticks. They're living tissue. That takes like 10 years. So the cells that make you today are not the same cells that make you about 10 years ago. But you have the cloning of those cells. So when you have let me see here. When you have germline cells, meaning cells that from the lining of the stomach, your immune system, those get replaced quite fast. So it makes a difference. They have something to prevent those nipping from happening, and that's an enzyme that we call telomerase. They make the telomeres long again. So even though the telomeres give you a very accurate estimate of your age, if I were to take a sample of your muscles, I can tell pretty much how old you are. But when I look at the telomeres from immune system cells, it's a little bit tricky, and we'll see how that goes. So we see that the telomerase, the enzymes that make the telomeres longer, they're really repressing normal somatic cells. And as they get shorter, the cells die. But the cancer cells, what did they do? Even though many of them are somatic cells, they found a way to turn that telomerase on, and they are what we call immortal cells. They don't die unless we take care of them. They live forever and they replace the normal cells. So it's something gone amok that is not good. So we've had gene therapy. Let's change the genes. Well, what do you mean by gene therapy? And I was mentioning, for example, we have 2 genes that suppress cancer growth. Elephants have 40. Imagine that. So if we lose those 2, we're in dire straits. We don't want to do that. So we look at gene therapy to keep that, and then we found out that really changing the genes by using little carriers, we just took the outside of the virus and put the gene that we wanted and send it in. And we were not getting great results in vitro. It hasn't been done or published in vivo yet to that point. But we talk about retailer children. I want a child with blue eyes and white teeth and all that stuff, and then we play with the genes. And so there's technology for it, but it's not ethical. But what I'm trying to tell you, that's something that's been looked at. Then we look at drugs. Well, why don't we just give me a medication that keeps my cells from getting older? And they look at one. There was these guys that went to the Galapagos, and they went to this little island. I think it was called Rapa Nui or something like that. And they found this substance, and it actually killed fungi, and they called it rapamycin. And it became a medication that we use for people that are getting transplants to hold your immune system so you don't reject the organs. And then they found out that there was a pathway that is the target of this medication is called rapamycin, target of rapamycin. And that target of rapamycin is a pathway that is related that when you're growing up, you get strong, you get handsome, and so on. Oh yeah, we like that. But once you stop growing, it actually has an effect that, because you're not growing like this, you grow like this. And it causes inflammation. There's oxidation. Basically, you're rusting when that thing is overly active. And of course, I'm taking a little bit of license from the scientific into just lay terms, but it's for you to understand that this thing, when it's overactive, is not good. And it promotes a stimulation of your immune system to a point that your immune system just throws everything to destroy whatever, even if there are healthy cells that are in the way. So you get innocent bystander damage as well. So it's not a good thing when that's overstimulated. So can we give them rapamycin to prevent that? And they tried, but they saw a lot of side effects. And one of the things that was particularly impaired was your immune system. So even if your cells in your liver or in your muscles, they seem to be longer, if you get an infection and die, well, that didn't work out too well. Right. They looked at another medication. There was a study, I think it was published just last year, and it was very small, and they were looking at a way to stimulate your immune system. And the study was called the TREAM study, the thymus stimulation or resurrection of your thymus and insulogenic mitigation. So they put people on growth hormone, metformin, DHEA, and vitamin D. But the study was looking just for immune function. They did this little thing, and they found that the telomeres were actually the telomeres of a person that was 2.5 years younger after 1 year intervention. So, gee, I've had patients, why do you put me on metformin? What do you do this? What growth hormone? And wait, hold on. The growth hormone actually stimulates insulin-like growth factor. And that insulin-like growth factor, what it does to you, stimulates an inflammatory cascade, and there's a lot of oxidation in your body. Again, you're rusting. That's why you eat antioxidants, to avoid the oxidation. And when the person's doing that, they found out that growth hormone, after you all done growing, actually causes a condition that we call acromegaly and induces diabetes. So how are we going to manage that? Well, let's give him metformin, which is a medication that we use for diabetes. How does metformin work? It's very interesting. Metformin works by blocking this same pathway, and that's why it increases insulin sensitivity. What does that mean? Well, Kumara was mentioning that the fat inside of the cells blocks the action of insulin. But it's not any fat. It's only fat that has been oxidized. So when you have oxidized, rusting fat in you, it messes up your system. I mean, if you have something rusty, it doesn't work that well. But that's the point. So metformin tends to block a little bit of that, so your insulin signaling works with less encumbrances. It works better. So the question about the gentleman about the avocados and the saturated fat, they did a study, and they fed some people hamburger. They check, they do an insulin clamp, and they look at the insulin level off the roof. If they put avocados in the hamburger, the insulin peak was lower. I'm not telling you to eat hamburgers with avocados, but what I'm trying to tell you is the amount of antioxidants in the avocados help blunt the response. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you agree with the fact that if you do things in moderation, you're better off? Okay, but that's not always true. I had a patient, burned his hand, gave him the best cream in the world, but kept burning his hand. Is it going to heal? No. Exactly. So we got to stop doing damage to yourselves in moderation. Just don't do any damage. Do you know what I mean? So there's, for example, my wife, she's after me. She says I'm mess in the kitchen. I am. And, I do a mess. Now I have to clean up all this. We're better off me not doing the mess, so I try to pay more attention. So that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you. So I'm not saying go and put avocados nonstop in hamburgers, but just be moderate and be smart. So the thing about the drugs is there are other studies. For example, people who are healthy, they exercise, they put them on metformin. There seems to be a correlation with longevity. But they didn't like it. Why? Because they were not getting buff. They were not having muscle hypertrophy. Why? Because metformin was blocking the mTOR, the target of rapamycin pathway. So we don't really see that many buff people living in Loma Linda, California, or in Okinawa, Japan. And as much as my well-intentioned meat-eating friends, and I love to have it, it's always good to have contrarian people tell me that, show me this study showing this. None of the populations in the blue zones have gotten there by eating red meat. It's by eating fruits and vegetables. But then I'll tell you something else. The telomerase activation, what activates that enzymes that repairs the telomeres in your immune system. Even if we get the new coronavirus, if you have a good immune system, you're less likely to suffer a lot of damage. SARS was a coronavirus too. Now, did it spread and everybody on the planet die? No. So you just have to develop some kind of immunity. And you're better off by doing that. That's what we call a stress event to your body. You are better prepared to handle stress, whether it's from a virus or from something else, when you have less inflammation going on. Otherwise, you're like trying to juggle too many things at the same time. And we've seen that, what really trumps, whatever beats gene therapy and drugs is actually lifestyle modifications. Lifestyle modifications are effective, they're cheap, and they're fun. You gotta have fun too. So number one, avoiding toxins. I just mentioned about not hurting yourself. Smoking is horrible. It takes about 8 years on average of your lifespan, but that's 8 years just of lifespan, not of disability. The amount of disability from tobacco is huge. And it is associated with damage to the DNA. That's why it is induces cancer. And I was mentioning on my talk last Friday, people don't believe me, but there was a medical study that found that if you eat cold cuts, if you eat a ham and cheese sandwich, it has the same carcinogen effect as one cigarette. Imagine that. So if you ate 20 of those sandwiches a day, it's just like smoking a pack a day. You'll be going to heaven really fast. So avoid that. But again, smoking, not good. What else? So this is not going to make me too popular here. Alcohol. But I'm going to show you this study here. I put the one that will let me save face. But in this study, they found that if you have more than 4 drinks a day, it significantly decreases the length of your telomeres. Oh, well, but I don't drink 4. That's true. So the women in the room, when you were pregnant, how many did they tell you could have? 0. Because alcohol is a potent DNA toxin. It's a potent. So you don't want that happening to the baby. What will you want it for you? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they gave this unrestricted grant for a study. It was published in 2018 in The Lancet. And they found that if you really want to decrease chronic medical conditions, what's the safest amount of alcohol to have? 0. It is a cocktail of inflammation. So, I'm not talking about prohibition. I'm just saying be smart. Don't drink it. If you drink it, seldom drink it. But there's no great benefits. When people talk about, how about Alzheimer's and so on? Well, it causes damage to your DNA. And they haven't done studies on people that have moderate amount of drinking versus people just having a whole food plant-based diet, not vegan. Vegan is not necessarily healthy, but a whole food plant-based diet. And they haven't done those studies because it will show that there's none. Avoiding toxins, occupational exposures. People, if you work in an X-ray department, that's why you carry that little badge to see if you're exposed to ionized radiation. If you work in construction, you might get exposure to asbestos. And, we were talking about pesticides through food. And then diet. We talk about committing suicide with a fork, eating all the other stuff. But when it comes to plant-based diets, and this is something that we made. It doesn't really look too big here. But that was a homemade bread. I do exercise quite a bit. So if I don't eat some homemade whole grain bread, I lose too much weight. So I can't keep losing weight. So I do that. And then we put a little bit of greens and the roasted peppers. And on the other one has peanut butters and blueberries. Good for your brain. That's a nice recovery meal for me after my workouts. Now, this study, look at that guy. That's mean 2003. So if you're a little chubby, I was just like you. But once you see the light and you change your weight, listen to this. My goal was not to lose weight. Skinny people die too, right? So that's not what we're looking for. What we want to do is increase function. As I was mentioning this last Friday, we don't want you doctor touring and procedure shopping. You know, we want you to go out and do what you want in life, but what you enjoy. Not having to see this doctor, taking a laundry list of medications. I'm not against medications. But if we can avoid them, great. And if you need them, well, we'll give them to you. But that's not what I'm pushing for. So we talk about oxidative stress and inflammation. And what it shows is that the people that we're following, when you have a lot of the inflammation and the stress, the risk for diabetes was more than double. And then it's not the diabetes thing. The diabetes, it just increases the speed by which you age significantly, significantly. It shaves off a lot of years from your lifespan. So this is something Kamara was talking about. The heterocyclic amine products that are formed when you're tearing open flame meat in animal products on the grill. Not good for you. The polycyclic aromatase heterocyclic compounds that they form when you char and you burn things, even like bread that is plant-based, it is carcinogenic. They cause mutations in your DNA. All the things I didn't put in there because I just couldn't put a sun, but if you put excess UV light, it creates thiamine dimers in your skin, and when those accumulate, they give you skin cancer. And if they accumulate too much, well, they give you melanoma. Don't go tanning. Don't go tanning. The acrylamide is with certain starches when they're cooked at high temperatures, the chips, the fries, and then Kumara was talking about the advanced glycation end products. And those happen, believe it or not, when you process foods, even plant-based foods, at very high temperatures. So you're better off cooking something at a low temperature for a long time. And the most common product that we know of this, as he was saying, is the hemoglobin A1C. Now, what the heck is the hemoglobin A1C? Well, you have hemoglobin, and it's the protein that transports oxygen. It's inside of your red blood cells. And then what happens when you eat sugar, the sugar binds to that protein, and the oxygen in it oxidizes that sugar. So it's like if you slice a watermelon and you leave it exposed to the air. Doesn't it get gunky? Well, we can get inside gunky like that. So we don't want. So that's something that we do. And those are also particularly fats that are cooked at very high temperature. So even if it is fried tempura, broccoli tempura, it's not good. You're getting a lot of AGEs. Okay, so what we love about the fried food is just the crunchiness. So we need to come up with something that will not give you AGEs and you can still eat. And I'll let Mo come up with something like that. Now, look at this. There are different fatty acids that are toxic. One of them is leucine, the other one is palmate. And what it shows here is that raised levels of cellular palmitate or palmic acid induces apoptosis, means cell death or lack of function. You just get sold. So when you eat a lot of products that have that, and they're found mainly these amino acids in animal products, it causes problems. That's why if someone has ever seen a kidney doctor and they have kidney problems, they tell them you have to decrease the amount of protein you eat because you're hurting your kidneys. It does not happen with plant protein because they don't have the same amount of these amino acids, the branch amino acids that are really negative for you. So the legumes, what happens with the legumes, the beans, and there was a study that found for every 2 tablespoons of beans you eat, you decrease your risk for death 8%. So if you eat the equivalent of a can, that's 250 grams, that's like an 80% reduction if you eat it every day. In fact, of all the blue zones, what they have in common is high legume intake. Oh, but if I eat that much, I'm going to be passing gas. And we were saying that it's better to pass gas than to pass on, as Michael Greger says. So what that happens is it triggers a change in the bacteria in your gut. And then you go from putrefying to composting. I am putrid. That's good. So, it makes a change. The other thing, the colorful fruits and vegetables, they have a lot of antioxidants to avoid what we were talking in that oxidation process. The berries, the best fruits you can eat. And then the seeds and the nuts. High nut consumption was associated with longevity, particularly the populations from Loma Linda and Okinawa, they do eat a lot of nuts. There was a small study. There's no money in it. It's not going to get repeated, so don't ask me if it is going to get repeated. But they found that if you ate 4 Brazil nuts, it decreases your cholesterol 20 points. Well, eat them. It's 4 once a month. It's not every day. 4 once a month. So they have things in them that they're really, that's a good thing. And, like the pecans and brain function, but particularly blueberries are like the darling for your brain. So the whole food plant-based diet certainly give you a lot of substrate and nutrition without causing the inflammation. They also change the bacteria in your gut, and they produce this compound, the butyrate. And the butyrate, they have several effects. It decreases insulin resistance because there's no oxidative stress to the fat inside of the cells. It has an anti-inflammatory effect, decreases the expression of cancer. So they did studies, and someone had mentioned about Dr. Ornish. I met him at the Lifestyle Medicine conference, and he was giving this talk, and he mentioned that when you actually are able to turn your genes on or off, of the top 10 medical causes of death in the US, about 80% of them are preventable. Only 10-20% are related to your genes. So we shouldn't be having a heart attack every 37 seconds, that's for sure. The effect on the cardiovascular disease and the genes, the neuroprotective stuff, actually right now there's an ongoing trial that he's doing on the plant-based diets, stress management through spiritual activities, meditation, prayer, whatever you want to do. I'm not telling you what to do, but it looks into that. Physical activity, and I forgot the fourth one. Oh, no, physical activity, exercise. That's the spiritual stuff. The sleep. Well, the sleep is coming into it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But it certainly it is very promising. And then the immune system. What happens when we decrease the amount of inflammation? The end result is stem cell stimulation. So I'm going to talk to you about something that is not related to the telomeres, but I have the microphone, so I have the ability to do that. And what I'm going to tell you is, because I see a lot of studies, the last one that I saw was from December 26, 2019 on the New England Journal of Medicine about intermittent fasting and longevity. So even if, how does it work? It works by blocking and shutting off that mTOR pathway and the insulin-like growth factor 1 levels. And when those are shut off, your immune system cleans house. As Mr. Stone was saying, autophagy. You start, auto means self, phagy, you're eating your own cells. Basically, you're eating all the crud, and you just leave a clean house. Mean, effective, working perfectly. And that's why you do the spring cleaning, That's exactly what, and when you do those levels, what happens is they measure the telomeres in the germline cells, and they're longer. It works really good. And they've done studies. This guy, he's pretty famous, Victor Longo. He's based in the University of California, San Diego. They did a study, a multitude of studies actually, on cancer. And they found that if you have cancer, they're going to give you chemotherapy. And they combine a 3-day fast, 2 days before, 1 day after the chemotherapy, increases the cancer-free rate like a 3-fold. Wow. Wow. And they're getting the same treatment, and they don't have as many of the side effects because the replacing of the cells gets stopped. And they don't get as much nausea because the cells they're not replacing. So they become a little bit immune to the oxidative damage from the chemotherapy. That's how chemotherapy works, is by releasing oxidative stress to the cancer cells. You may have heard, when someone has cancer, the doctors tell them, don't eat blueberries, don't eat antioxidants because it may decrease the efficiency of the treatment. But they found that when you actually do the fasting like that, it works great. Now, fasting is not my gift. I'm going to be honest with you. But when I see the effects on your immune system and on longevity, it's not necessarily because I want to live longer. I just want to be able to do what I want, go to sleep and wake up in heaven. Never in a nursing home, never at the hospital. I just want to do what I want to do, not what the doctor, you know what I mean. So when we have this reduction in these pathways and your immune system works better, the likelihood of you developing a chronic medical disease is extremely low. Do we have studies about that? And then it talks about stem cell activation, the very last. You know what's the beauty of stem cell activation? It's not that you're repairing process. It's a repairing process. It's a replacement. You're replacing cells with brand new from the stem cells. And you're getting the longer telomeres again. Yeah. Exercising and telomeres. That's me after I clean up my act with my wife in California. We do cycling tours wherever we go. But I forgot. Okay, we can do, I apologize, I forgot the stretch and I have you sleeping here. Well, let's do the stretch here for a second. I'll stop. Thank you, Kumara. Yeah, it's a good slide. So what we're going to do, wait, you were too fast. I was going to have you stand up slowly like this. Slowly. And now we're going to reach up to get good stuff. I'm going to bring it down. Then we're going to push chronic medical diseases to one side, Tai Chi style. Now medical diseases to the other side. Good. Now I need you to put a foot in front of you like this. Now I'm going to go sideways so you can see it. I need you to stick your butt out and your chest out so you have that curvature in your back. You don't hurt your lower spine. And you bend and you're going to feel the stretch. Do you feel that? If you're doing it right. Your toes have to be pointing up, by the way. If they're pointing down, you won't feel it. Toes have to be pointing up. You feel the stretch, and we hold that stretch. 1, 2, 3. Good. Let's do the other side. 1, 2, 3. Good. And now, let's go like this, and hold on to one elbow, bend the arm, and let's stretch our light span here. Good. And let's do the other arm. And let's stretch to join life. Good. And then now we're going to rotate your shoulders, shaking off bad stuff. And then we're advancing forward. Okay. And we're going to stretch our arms like this. We're going to go sideways one side and the other. Good. Have a seat. Thank you. All right, we can go back. Gee, I apologize. Thank you. Wow, I'm glad you reminded me. So, with exercising and telomeres. Now, these telomeres, if you can see the studies, they talk about leukocyte So that we're talking about germline cells. We're not talking about somatic cells. And they look, the more you exercise, the longer they are. Now, look at this. Heavy exercises. Do you know what that was? 30 minutes a day. So it's not a big thing. You don't need to do a 5K. No. Now, how about sedentary lifestyle versus habitual exercising, which is the holy grail that we found in all the medical studies, is 150 minutes a week. That is walking briskly, 12 minutes out, 12 minutes back. That's it. You don't even need a gym membership for that. 12 minutes out, 12 minutes back. You can do that. Now look at this. These are the guys like Kumar exercise a lot. These are actually marathon runners. They look at the telomeres. Okay, here we go. The guys not exercising and the athletes exercising, but these are really heavy exercises. They're doing 50 miles a day. I mean a week. 50 miles a week. And this is when they're 20, and this is when they're in their 50s, and the guy's still doing the 50 miles a day. The telomeres in the germline cells were as long as the guy who's 20. Well, but they had no other life. They were just running all the time. So that's not what I'm advocating for you to do, but it just gives you an idea of the power of exercising. But exercising is not a way to compensate for poor diet choices. Oh, I remember initially when I was chubby, I went for this bike ride 70 miles. I was living in Rhode Island, went into Connecticut and back and stuff. Man, I felt good. And I had a mighty big Sunday as a reward. Not good, not good. Now, look at this study. They did a study looking at people at the telomere length, and some of them were controlled, not doing anything. The other group, not exercising, they just decreased calories. The other one were doing exercising or a combination. And that diet did not decrease bad stuff. They just decreased the amount of calories. And guess what? There was no change in the telomeres. So exercising is not a substitute to healthy eating. It certainly helps, but it will not substitute. Telomere length and stress. Wow, this is very important because this is not pie in the sky. This is not. So stress is unavoidable. If you never had a problem in life, you're lying. Yeah, you're lying. So what do you do when life throws a curve at you? Okay? So we cannot keep emotions from happening, but how we react to them is different. And they found that when you're under high stress situations, people were having much lower telomeres versus the low stress. And it's interesting, they did studies on mothers who were taking care of ill children, kids with leukemia, and so I mean it's not just the amount of work, it's the emotional component to it. And it causes severe telomere shortening. So it's not that the telomeres get shorter, but they're an indicative of increased damage and cells being replaced over and over and over. Now, this other study was done on people taking the caregivers of patients with Alzheimer's. And we can see control people not having to take care of people with Alzheimer's. Their telomeres tended to be longer than the caregivers. And this is before the intervention to see how if they will do better with some coping mechanisms. And they found that later on. I'm going to show you something here. This is a group of people diagnosed with bladder cancer. They were all getting the same medications, same treatment. They were not changing their diet or exercise, so all that has been accounted into. But they were measuring the length of the telomeres, so how many cells they were replacing from damage, and they were checking to see if they were highly stressed or if they were depressed. They used depression. And after 2.5 years, about 12.5% of the people had died. But what about if they had both that depression and the short telomeres? After 2.5 years, over 60% had died. They were getting the same medications. And they were eating the same diet. How about after 5 years, if they only had one of the two, about 40-something% of the people had died. How about if they had both? So how you react to stress and how you react in life plays an important role in how well you will do. And I was mentioning last Friday, I live in Bourne, close to where I practice, and we have one of those infamous rotaries there. And I was getting into the rotary, and this guy cut me off, and I felt the spirit of slap coming over me. I wanted to slap the guy. But listen, that guy drove off, and I was the one that was left behind with all that, So we need to control this kind of emotions or situations. Sometimes I don't make emotional decisions. Sometimes, my wife is so nice to me. I get up in the morning. I don't want to get up and go to work, but I go. Do you know what I mean? I don't let the feelings control me. So likewise, you can let the good feelings run, but the bad ones, you check on them. Use your brain. Now, this is a study showing a difference between meditation and relaxation. They had a group of people, you think about Tommy Bahamas in the little, hammock in the sun, that's relax. But when you are meditating, the word meditation means to think, to ponder, to contemplate. When you are meditating, thinking and contemplating on what, we're going to talk about that in a second. Some people call it prayer, meditation, whatever. But when you're doing it, it actually blocks oxidative pathways in your body, and the telomeres get longer. We just saw it on the people with cancer. And medical studies have shown, for example, we use a lot what we call mindful meditation, but there's studies showing that, at least in women, loving kindness meditation is even better at prolonging your telomeres. So what do you mean loving kindness meditation? You have to remember, love is not just a feeling, it's a disposition. And when you cannot give what you don't have, so you have to receive first. So when you start meditating, you can go to mindful.org, and they have different meditations you can choose from. But if you look at the the loving kindness meditation, you have to concentrate on the love that you're receiving. And then that's why in the blue zone areas, they look at, Loma Linda and the Adventists and their faith. The people in Okinawa, they have a different kind of faith, but they have faith too, and so on. Whichever faith you have, but when you receive love from God, your family, your friends, you get nurtured, and then you can project that out. Well, Doc, you can't choose your family. That's tricky there. The friends, they're not 100% loyal. Well, get a pet. People with pet live longer because they love you unconditionally. You come home, and they're wagging their tails, and they love to see you, even if you have a bad hair day. So you receive that love, you give it out, you pass it on, and you will see great effects. The person receiving it does not need to deserve it. They did a study in which they were measuring people with random acts of kindness towards others, and the outcomes in their health were much better just from random acts of kindness. So the Boy Scouts were right. Do your good turn. So this is a study from Dr. Ernish, and they found that after just 3 months of this intervention, the telomeres improve and increase in size significantly. And then after 5 years, they have much better telomeres than the other guys. What's interesting is the amount of telomerase, the enzymes that repairs the telomeres, it was the most active only in the first 3 months because they repaired the damage, and then people were coasting. And what were the areas they were looking at? Again, they were looking at sleep, because your body repairs when you're sleeping. That's what they were mentioning. I'm not telling you have to sleep X number of hours. Drug sleep, meaning when you take sleeping pills, They don't promote REM sleep, so the repairing process doesn't necessarily happen. We need to make changes in the way that we approach sleep. For example, I went to this conference and they were talking about physician burnout, and they're saying, well, you can't be doing charting and electronic medical records like 5 minutes before you go to bed. You have to stop working and release your mind from work for at least an hour or two and wind down and do something that is not stressful. So don't watch the impeachment process. Go and watch a nice series that you like. Something nice that will help you wind down. The other thing is, don't eat for 4 hours before bedtime, and you will see great results in your sleep. Exercising improves sleep. And the other thing is, don't look at your phone or your laptop or your iPad or your tablet, within an hour or two of going to bed. But after 5 years, the telomere length were much longer with the exercising, the sleep. I'm blanking here. Hold on. The plant-based nutrition, exercising, sleep, and meditation. These are risk factors, and that what we see, the state of burden of disease, what causes the most things that we've talked about, the 10 top causes of death, but this is what triggers that, and we have the number 1, diet, 2, tobacco, high blood pressure that is not controlled, high body mass index, particularly it gets really bad when your body mass index is over 30. Physical inactivity, not exercising. The other ones don't account as much. So let's concentrate on those 5. And when it comes to weight loss, don't concentrate on weight loss. Based on what we found is, instead of focusing on the fear of being heavy, on the fear of getting a chronic medical disease, concentrate on the joy of relating to other people, the joy of doing activities, being mindful. When you concentrate on good things, the weight loss becomes a little bit less of an issue for me. I think I just need you to enjoy life. That's the bottom line. And then the risk factors, and this is related to not just death, but now disability. And again, number 1 cause of disability is not falling from a ladder, is diet. And then tobacco, and then high body mass index, and the high blood pressure. So one is diseases, the other one is disability. So in Germany, they eat horrible. They do. I can tell you my wife's family is German. So here, healthy living, the best revenge. They look to see what they could do to improve them. They did 4 things. They say, if you're not obese, so your BMI is less than 30. Number 2, you exercise 30 minutes a day. This is in this study. Number 3, you eat a healthy diet. Well, what the heck is a healthy diet in all these people? They said, well, you have to eat at least 5 servings of fruits and or vegetables a day. Kumara was showing that the more fruits and vegetables you eat unrefined, the lower your cardiovascular risk. So these days, apples are so big, there's 2 servings. Handful of blueberries makes it 3. You have a salad, 4. You have a vegetable with dinner, 5. That's it, easy peasy, you can do it. So you do that, and then the exercising, the diet, I guess let me see and never smoking, of course. If you never smoked, then if you have the 4, your risk for chronic medical diseases goes down 78%. What is your risk of getting diabetes? It goes down 93%. 93% reduction. How about a heart attack? 80% reduction. How about a stroke? In half, 50% reduction. How about cancer? 36% reduction. So this study is nice, but what about if you smoked in the past? So this was not too nice. We had the CDC do one here in the US. And they look at 3 things. Not smoking currently. So you could have been a former smoker, but not smoking currently. Number 2, forget about the waste. not looking at your weight. They look at your activity level. If you're doing 150 minutes a week, not even the 30 minutes the German, that's all the trying to cut out all the cold cuts and stuff. But if you only do the 12 minutes out, 12 minutes back a day, and the last one is the healthy diet, the 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. If you do those 3 things, you cut your risk. Oops, wrong button. You cut your risk. What is your risk for death in comparison to control? Is 18% of what they are. You cut your risk for death in the next 6 years, 82%. 82%. And you don't need to take medications like the rapamycin or the metformin, just simple stuff. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about this, the vitalities. And this is something I use in my practice. It is not a commercial, but what I want for this for you, this is for you, so you can do this in your own. We'll look at these different things that and the outcomes in life, and the studies have shown significantly better outcomes. So resilience is your ability to cope. So 0, you're not doing too well. 10, you're coping great when bad things happen. It's not that they don't happen, but how you cope. So you grade yourself in it. Rest, how much are you sleeping? Are you sleeping enough to have energy the next day for your activities? If you do, you're repairing. If you're not and you're always tired, you have damage that is accumulating in your body. So you need to sleep longer. Relationships, how you relate to other people. Your friends, your family, school, work, different spheres of life. So if you're relating to other people and they're usually nice relationships, you do significantly better. So hang around with people you like. The chemicals, exposure to chemicals. So if you're exposed to a lot of UV light, that's not good. If you're drinking water and it's tainting like in Flint in the Middle West, you don't want that. And then activity, 150 minutes a week. Sunlight, medical studies have shown not necessarily that you're in the sun, but if you don't even see the sun through a window, if you're in a bunker with no windows, the amount of serotonin in your body goes down. And that leads to stress. So you need exposure to the sunlight, even if it is through a window. Make sure you do that. If not, go and buy a happy lamp from Amazon. Am I over? Yes, I apologize. And then nutrition, the plant-based diet, and spirituals, whatever makes you tick, go for it. Thank you. Any questions?